welcome to the Curious Cult podcast, the show where we talk to incredible people about their fascinating curiosity. I am your obsessively curious host, Nick Haralambous, and today I'm excited to be talking to Husayn Kassai, who I met coincidentally on a flight between Amsterdam and London. Husayn is the Onfido CEO and co-founder. Onfido helps businesses digitally onboard users by verifying any government ID and comparing it with a person's facial biometrics. Founded in 2012, Onfido has grown to a team of 350 across San Francisco, New York, and London, received over $100 million in funding from Salesforce, Microsoft, and others, and works with over 1,500 fintech, banking, and marketplace clients globally. Husayn is a WEF tech pioneer, a Forbes contributor, and Forbes 30 Under 30. He has a BA in Economics and Management from Cable College, Oxford. Husayn, welcome to the show, and why don't you tell me about how you believe curiosity relates to innovation?
So curiosity, if it's defined as a way of essentially questioning things or questioning the status quo, then you have to try hard not to be constrained by the status quo as far as the current ways of thinking things. And that often can mean being an outsider, coming into a space where there is not something, you're open to trying anything. And with us, we're now 350 people. It was almost our 90th person or 91st person that we hired was someone from the industry. Everyone else had no experience in the side industry whatsoever. And that helps you think of things in new ways. I remember the Nissan plant, when it opened in the UK, in Sunderland, they actually picked Sunderland because as a region, it had no history of another car manufacturer being there. And there were other sites available where there were, in fact, skilled individuals with experience in manufacturing vehicles. So the reason why Nissan picked a place that had no history of any car manufacturing whatsoever is because they had a fresh new approach of things. And they didn't want people coming with either, don't want to call it baggage, but outdated ways of thinking about things. And therefore, or outdated habits that are no longer appropriate. So there are these benefits, I guess. Most tech companies are often, on average, made up of a younger demographic than other companies. And part of that may be because if they're more able to think of things in new ways and they're not bogged down with old ways of thinking and they're able to sort of think outside of the box, that doesn't have to be a rule. You can have someone who is very experienced in a different industry that enters a new industry and yet is able to have a fresh approach and a fresh look. I think it's fundamental to have that perspective, and the curiosity and innovation are related as long as you are open-minded enough and don't have these old constraints or narrow ways of thinking and looking at the world, so that you in fact can see an alternative and a better way of trying things.
Cool. And you touched on this lightly, but very specifically asking the question, do you hire for curiosity? Is it one of the things that you use as a measure? Or, like, you know what I mean? Is there a feeling that you get from someone that keeps you interested in them as a potential candidate?
We do. So we work hard to hire lifelong learners, and that it's often goes hand in hand. But we do try quite a bit. I mean, if you're an engineer or a programmer, we have a few tests, and part of those tests try to see if you can think outside of the box to solve for a problem. We try, whether we always do or not, I couldn't say. You want a mixed skill set. Sometimes you have free thinkers, those who are curious, trying new approaches. And then you need other individuals with different skill sets who perhaps are better at focusing on one thing, and they just need simple and straightforward processes to follow and in order to develop certain things. So a mix is always good, and it's not necessarily that the more curious people the better, but most definitely, in my view, on balance, you definitely would want as many or more if possible.
Great. I love that you mentioned the phrase lifelong learners. It's definitely one of the key topics that I'm picking up in my research and in my interviews is curious people are obsessed with learning constantly. And Peter Senge is one of the forefront writers on this topic, and he talks about learning organizations. Is Onfido a learning organization? And like, do you push for that kind of continual learning once you've hired someone to retain them?
We absolutely are. And well, we hire lifelong learners too. And it's just a case of it is, in my view, like value is derived from the team and it's teamwork. And therefore, you are, in this day and age, you can't even begin to compete effectively unless you're continuously developing and offering opportunities for everyone to grow, especially in a competitive world. So we not only do it, we see it as a core strength. We have Onfido University, we have peer-to-peer learning, we have a whole series of programs to encourage that and continuously improve it. So the answer is yes.
Cool. I mean, something that's interesting to me is one of the roadblocks for organizations that don't have continuous learning and curiosity as a core structure is the efficiency problem. They don't believe that it's efficient to let people wonder, to let people think and experience the world around them. But here you are talking about a university and pushing your lifelong learning inside of the organization. So, how do you balance the short term value of someone's time focused on a problem that needs to be solved now versus giving them the time to be lifelong learners and not be really efficient in the short term?
So there, it depends on the objective. Naturally, if there is a defined job role or problem set that needs to be solved, there is working harder or working smarter, and it's well known that if you dedicate a certain amount of time to thinking about how you can improve processes, then on balance in the longer term you're going to be able to produce more or work or have a greater output. So we have initiatives such as OKR, objectives and key results. So we have business as
Mhm.
usual and uh, BAUs, and we have KPIs, key performance indicators. These are the main things that a team needs to be working towards. It could be like revenue targets if you're a sales team, for instance. And then you have OKRs, objectives and key results, which are predominantly geared towards around improvements of these processes. And so that's how we structure it. We have quarterly OKRs, but it can be other things. If it's trying something outside of the box, we have typically quarterly hackathons where the engineers get together, break out into 10 or 20 teams, and work on different things. And in that, it doesn't have to be a company related thing, it can be non company. It usually ends up being a company related things. In fact, we've got quite a few of our features that have derived from these hackathons. And then we do workshops and offsites and all those things to encourage this kind of thing as well. Yeah, these are a series of different initiatives to facilitate that space. It's also, I think, that part of what you could do aesthetically, or as far as like the company goes, is also an informal dress code. I tend to find fosters that having different colors, like the Google look or the WeWork
Mm,
look. There's a reason why more and more tech companies are using these same things because that or a pen and pencil, right? So it stops any constraints around your mind, like free thinking. So you have
mhm,
whiteboards everywhere, right? All these tools can also play a material role in helping it, as well as if the companies or startup is large enough to have a space, a communal space, such as a dining center or coffee center or something, so that people just gather around a table, huddle around a table, and think through things. All these things can also combined play a role in encouraging both curiosity and innovative thinking, because often you'd find that it's most effective when it's done as a team, or you have that water
mm.
cooler conversation where it's, hey, have you thought about trying something this way? And that can turn into something that is impactful.
And an observation of business generally is that shareholder value and profit are above all else. And there are very few businesses in the world that have managed to convince their shareholders to reinvest profit at the rate like Amazon, for example, who just reinvest no matter what and do innovative, interesting things all the time. What I'm curious about is you're a VC backed business. Do you ever have pushback from your board or shareholders around the ways you get to spend your money that lead to curiosity and innovation?
So we do. So my view definitely is not one that shareholder maximization is the pure focus. It's
Hmm.
all within a time frame. And arguably, the reason why we and all our peers are doing well is the failure of the large incumbents. And that failure is endemic, and it's there because they are often listed companies where they have shareholders demanding quarterly results, whereas the tech companies that are doing well are able to invest for the next 5, 10, 20 years. And they are, as a result, are doing so well. So for us, we've always been clear that we have a 10 and a 20-year plan, and that's what we're working towards. And we are growing fast so that we only are attracting or encouraging investors to invest if they buy into that mission. Whereas if we were listed in a public company, there wouldn't be as much freedom. And that is, and also plays a big role in the innovator's dilemma. And that if you're a listed company, with just a shareholder base that are driving towards quarterly results, how can you take risks? How can you try and deviate from what is able to deliver short term revenue? And by
Mm.
definition, you're not able to innovate and you're not able to develop for or invest for the future product. We've all had these examples, right? Anything from Kodak to all the others that eventually
Yeah,
have run out of
yeah.
business. The answer to your question is we are in some ways focused on shareholder maximization, but that is secondary. The primary focus is similar to Amazon, is to delight the customer first and foremost and have a very long term view. A shareholder return is derived from that, not the other way around. And it is a main reason why I think we're able to, in large part, do so well.
Interesting. One of my fascinations that kind of runs in parallel to curiosity is the concept of failure. I believe that the three ideas of failure, curiosity, and innovation are all tied in a never-ending flywheel. You can't push your team to innovate if they're not curious, and you can't let them be curious if you're not willing to let them fail. So I'm interested in, it's a two-part question, how you deal with failure personally, and then how, as a business, Onfido deals with failure when your team is trying stuff that's new.
When you elevate the importance of failure, of learning, excuse me, over and above like immediate returns, that is when you are able to see failure. As long as the what derives from the failure is greater learning, then it's not really defined as failure. So it's a mindset shift, and it's done so
Mm,
by encouraging people to try different things, and obviously that means honoring your commitment to learning. So if inevitably projects don't go well, first of all you shorten the cycles so that you say, hey, let's try this for a month and then decide if we proceed, so that you're not running too fast. Secondly, we don't encourage people coming forward with proposals. We only ask for qualified proposals. So let's say you
mm,
have $2,000 to invest in your proposal. You show a result, however small that may be. Then you come to ask for major funding, maybe 200 or $300,000 towards that initiative, to then scale it. And that way, you kind of get rid of the noise. So qualified proposals is another key parts of this, and the question then becomes how do we scale as opposed to what will work and won't work. And no one really needs significant permission to run with small scale experimentation. So I think all these play a role.
that's a fantastic way to do it from the ground up, is that no one is kind of resisted from a higher boss level. If you want to do something innovative, you go ahead and do it, and you've now qualified it, and then you can go and scale it for the business. That's really smart.
Yeah, you do have to set the right direction and what the end state is. So we are here to solve the identity problem. We talk about it all the time, and everyone's geared towards thinking in that way. And therefore, all the innovation is always geared towards that. So there has to be something you're curious about, and the curiosity is how do we solve this for the customer? Amazon has done
Sure.
something similar, right? So their assumptions on the average customer, they prefer convenience, they prefer a lower cost. And so all their initiatives are geared towards driving to one of those two things. Because if you're not necessarily too clear about the focus, you can have people drifting off and sometimes inadvertently working counter to the company's end state. So
Mm-hmm.
this Facebook's mantra of let's run fast and break things, well, they've broken quite a bit. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's been a backlash, right? And that backlash is only going to grow, in my view. So it does have to be in some ways defined and within a area of focus so that all the creative thinking is directed towards that and not just open ended. But this is, I guess, such an important point, and then you have companies that do it well and succeed, and those who don't and don't do as well.
Mm. And now, thinking more specifically about your personal curiosity, one of the things that has come up as a core theme is the ability to curate what you're interested in. You know, you're obviously a voracious reader and you can read wide and you can read deep, but how do you choose what to read and what to focus on and what to dive deeply into?
Part of it is recommendations. Part of it's like what's happening. I would say probably only a third or less is related to the company. Two-thirds are not, and sometimes you can see patterns in other things. I find very many patterns in reading around development. Again, economics of developing countries in like strategy and so on. It's just at a country level as opposed to a company level. So all
Mm.
that plays a role. It does help when you have, we live in a world of podcasts and TED Talks and things of that nature. So all that has a role to play.
And you don't find that it's overwhelming, that
I
there is
do.
so
There's,
much
yeah,
to choose from?
very much so. It's like infomania, right? Too much, and that's why
Yeah.
I've switched off from the news. I typically, catch up only an hour a week on current affairs. I only listen to Audible, only the things I'm interested in. Doesn't have to
Mm,
be work related. I'm more into nonfiction than fiction, but there should be periods where you completely switch off and you just, in my view, like for me, just don't do anything as far as like reading or learning goes, so that you give yourself some space and then you go back again with the hunger to learn. So that is my, because this isn't a race. It's a case of, in order for you to absorb the knowledge and make use of it, you have to want to, you have to be interested and you have to want to learn, which only really
mm,
comes if you're in the right state. So I think in a world where we are used to Instagram, Twitter, and you could think of it as volume but no substance, that doesn't help anyone. I prefer structured analysis and alternative thinking that comes from, focusing on maybe a book for 2 or 3 weeks, as opposed to maybe 300 articles, or the news, which is a news cycle, is more entertainment and informing as opposed to education.
mm. It was one of my goals for this year was to read less but read better. I have a
I hear
problem of
you.
just consuming and absolutely not retaining what I read.
And exactly, it's to what end? So I do know a lot of people have the New Year's resolution is to read like one book a week or one book a fortnight, and
Mm,
I've never understood that. There's a book that I'm still like 4 months into, and I still haven't finished. Just
mm,
sometimes I feel like listening to it, and I carry on with another chapter, and other times I don't. So
yeah.
I'm definitely in your end of the spectrum as far as the quality, depth, and substance goes, as opposed to sheer volume.
Yeah. And I'm curious, do you allocate time specifically to let your mind wander about things that aren't work related and just passion projects that interest you?
Not in a structured way as you may think, but I do dedicate time to doing non-work related things. So, I have a cutoff in the evening where like work ends. I do on the weekends. One full day is like zero work. Usually, the second day of the weekend, it's at most half that day, depending on what's going on. Sometimes it might be a full day, there may be a conference, but on balance, to those free time periods, then often there's the range of other things that make up for it. But no, I don't.
Okay,
Some people I know that they say, okay, I have to do an hour every morning of X, Y, Z, and so I'm not like that.
cool. And the people that you surround yourself with, your co-founders, your team, your best friends, are they also curious people by nature? And do they kind of push you to be curious, or do you generally try and steer towards old friends who you have lots in common with and you have the regular day-to-day conversations?
No, in fact, it is the former, as you said. It is the people around who are involved in all the important material decision makings. You could call them skeptics. And I think you should have that.
Mm,
It's standard chief revenue officer, chief financial officer dynamic, right? Chief revenue officer or marketing officer has all the ideas, and then your chief financial officer or chief operations officer says no, no, and like is basically pushing back. That tension is very
mm,
healthy and very necessary, especially for younger founders, in my view, who don't have the experience to the same level. And so we all the important decision making processes we run through one or two cycles with key members involved, and it's appropriate to call them like in the skeptic bucket, just because they
mhm.
have to be. So the most level-headed and, I guess, inquisitive and critical team member that we have is our chief strategy officer, and so
Okay.
any idea has to go through him. The second to that is our VP of strategy, and the third is probably the director of strategy. And I think that is really important. It's time consuming, and you have to work hard at persuading, and you're not always able to, but you can only really have them engaged and do well if it's a trusted relationship where you might have an idea go through 8 out of 10 times. 1 out of 10 times they may disagree, and you may say, look, I'm keen to go ahead with this regardless, can we just take a bet and like run with it? And then one at a time you
Mm.
ought to just say, okay, I hear you all, and let's just stop, move on to the next thing.
Yeah, two interesting things there. You talk about trust, and that goes all the way back to our conversation about hiring. And you have to hire the right people and make sure that you've got the curated people in your organization. And then the second thing makes me think of Amazon's disagree but commit rule, that you
Completely.
can disagree with someone, but you've got to commit at some point because they know better than you. You've hired them to do that job. You've got to trust that they know what they're doing.
Absolutely. So we clarify what points were in a sort of a meeting. So in our meetings, you can have a green zone and a red zone. A green zone is when everyone's thinking about new ways of solving this specific problem. The red zone is everyone then switches gears and becomes critical of that problem and thinks about all the ways it may go wrong. So we have a
Oh, that's
clearly
great.
defined like brainstorming session. Then when you get to a decision making session, you say at the outset, by the end of this process, we need to come to a decision. And at the end of that process, depending on what the topic is, you can often call a vote. And when you call a vote, two thumbs up means I agree and I commit. But one thumb up, one thumb down is I disagree but commit. And that is something that everyone should visibly see. And
Mm,
again, it's this Google's notion of psychological safety, where everyone knows that they are more than welcome to disagree. But if as a collective, we've spent the time to go through it, and at the end, a decision is made, then we decide to
mm,
commit and run with it.
that's great. And my final two but favorite questions. The first is, what are you most curious about right now? And that could literally be anything, not necessarily work related.
So it is election season. I'm very curious about
Mhm.
it, the way that just people tend to think about these things, and the specifically the role that media plays, and whether if it's sort of 5 years of cognitive conditioning from a media outlet can be offset with 1 or 2 weeks or even 1 or 2 months ahead of an election. Like, is there any way of countering that? So that is something that's I'm currently both reading about and thinking about.
Great. And then the final question, what is keeping you up at night right now?
I think only in the last year the climate has become a big issue for me, and it's
Mhm.
strange because I just thought about it from time to time. You know, if you're booking a flight, you might feel guilty for a few seconds, and then you just do it anyway because everyone else is. But in the last year,
Yeah.
this is something that I think I'm kind of, because every other week there's something happening in the news where you have more and
Mm,
more scientists giving this hard deadline, and where unfortunately I don't see a workable solution without significant sacrifice. And I
mm.
know that the powers that be are not up for sacrifice. So it's something that I'm right now is as and when I do give mind space to be concerned about something, this is one of the forefronts.
Understandable. And look, thank you so much for giving me so much of your time. As always, it's a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to seeing Onfido grow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you for listening to the Curious Cult podcast, the show where we talk to incredible people about their fascinating curiosity. If you like this episode, please rate the show, like it, share it, and generally be kind to us and tell people about it. My goal is to spark curiosity that changes the world, and you can help by talking about the show to anyone who will listen. Stay curious. Until next time.